3 weeks ago, I was in Myanmar, in Bagan. I was hiking around in a temple. It was very dark, very isolated. I tried to go up a corridor.
My current corona situation here in Sri Lanka.
It was just 8 days ago that I was in one of the current epicenters of COVID-19, Switzerland.
We're on the South Island of New Zealand, so it'd be safer for us to stay here than it would be to go back to the United States.
If anything, 12 years of full-time travel has taught me, it's that there's no place like home.
Then the next day, I think it was March 16th, something like that, they closed down all the schools here in India.
I was in El Nido in the Philippines, and I was at a friend's house, and the president of the Philippines came on, and he announced that they were shutting down all the airlines in like 2 days.
Hey there, I'm Gabriel Morris, aka Gabriel Traveler here on YouTube, and I am currently self-isolating in Canada. I will talk a little bit more about what that means exactly in just a minute, but my last video was telling the story of how I decided all of a sudden to leave Mexico, where I was a couple of weeks ago, and as a result of everything that was starting to happen and things escalating and changing very rapidly, then I decided to change location from where I was in Mexico and instead come to Canada. President Trump had just closed the borders of the United States to travelers coming from Europe, or at least from Europeans trying to enter the United States. That was a signal to me that things were going to get bad, quick, potentially, and if I wanted to make a move, then I should make the move now rather than later in order to avoid potential travel obstacles and various difficulties which many travelers have faced and are still facing, as you will see in the upcoming videos. And so I told the story of deciding to leave Mexico and come to Canada, and so I was born here. I was born in Vancouver, and I am a dual American-Canadian citizen. And so people heard my story in that video, but I thought that it would be interesting for people to hear other stories of other travelers from all around the world who have been dealing with this, virus situation and the escalating crisis that is still going and will be going for a long time by the looks of it. And so I asked my viewers and also some other travelers if they would like to contribute some video clips of them telling their story of what they went through in the course of everything that is happening in the world right now. But before I get to the other stories, then for people who might be wondering what does this self-isolation mean exactly, then no, I have not tested positive for the virus. I do not have any symptoms whatsoever. I am feeling great, in perfect health. But for anyone who is entering Canada at this time, and this started just a couple of days before I arrived, then everyone is expected to self-isolate for a period of 14 days. So that means even if you were just going on vacation to Mexico for like a week and came back into Canada after this decision was determined, then you would have to self-isolate for 14 days. And so it is not a quarantine in some sort of government trailer or whatever. As you can see, I have a nice Airbnb here. And so it is a voluntary, but it is actually required. You can actually get a up to $2,000 fine apparently for not complying with the self-isolation, but it is not a monitored kind of a situation. And so I had absolutely no idea what to expect upon arriving in Canada, because this was all just kind of in the process. This had just been announced like a day or two before I was going to be flying. I think that I had actually already booked my flight and reserved my accommodation here. And so I get on the plane and I just don't really know what's going to happen once I arrive. I get to the airport, go through customs. They don't even say anything in customs, but there are signs around saying various things about wash your hands and stay away from people and social distancing, and mentioning the self-isolation requirement. And then I go through customs and am, officially in Canada. And then there are various security guards, or maybe they were actual policemen, I'm not exactly sure, but anyways, official security type of guys standing around, and they stop you and ask you some questions. How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? Do you have, cold symptoms or whatever? And then they say, and you know that you're supposed to self-isolate for 14 days, right? And I say, yep. And they say, okay, carry on. And that is it. They don't give you any detailed information at all as far as what does that mean exactly, what can you do, what can't you do. Just you're supposed to self-isolate, and you have to just kind of figure that out on your own. I even looked up on the Canadian government website, and there it does not provide any specific information exactly what that means anyways. Now, obviously, I cannot all of a sudden have zero contact with any human beings from that point forward, because I'm in an airport and I now have to get my luggage and I have to get some cash and I have to get out of the airport and I have to get into the city and I have to check into where I'm staying, and I then have to figure out how I'm going to eat, for the next 2 weeks. And so just to make a longer story short, then I got all set up in an Airbnb here, and I am now, self-isolating. I have not been in contact with anybody for many days now. And so I've been self-isolating for 9 days so far and have 5 days left. And then I will have a little bit more freedom, but of course we'll still be social distancing, and we'll see what happens from then on, if there will be some sort of a lockdown in Canada. That hasn't happened yet, and so people can still go out and walk around. Basically, most businesses are closed except for fast food and takeout at some restaurants and supermarkets and grocery stores, and that's about it. And so it is basically a ghost town out there. If I can, then I will document what it is like out on the streets of Canada right now, as things are, if it is safe to do so, and depending on what happens in the future. But anyways, here I am on my own for another 5 days, and coming up are now some more stories from various travelers around the world and what they've been through in the course of this crazy coronavirus pandemic situation. All right, here we go.
I'm very happy to, when you asked me this morning to make a video about my current corona situation here in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is as idyllic and picturesque as ever. It's probably more picturesque than ever because you don't have any tourists. Now that is good if you like to enjoy solitude and nature on your own. Of course, it's very bad for the people who make their livelihood in the tourism industry. Hotel workers, restaurants, everything here is up in the air, and we're looking at a huge depression here, not just in the travel industry, but probably in the wider economy at large at the island, as is the rest of the world as well. So we're all in this together. The whole world is going to suffer through this plague. Now, you asked me to comment upon the ramifications for me as a traveler. That's a luxury problem. I mean, yeah, so us travelers who are roaming the globe, trying new food, checking out new cultures, we're now unable to do that for 3 to 6 months, but that's not really a problem. I mean, that is a huge luxury problem. So me as a traveler, haven't really been affected by this yet. We'll see what happens here. I mean, they might close hotels, they might tell foreigners that you have to leave, who knows, but that hasn't happened yet. So for now here on Sri Lanka, there is a curfew, and that curfew seemed to let up about once a week, so people can go out and do their shopping and so on. That's it pretty much. It's early here. There are very few people who have been infected by the Mexican bear, known as Corona. Still a great bear, by the way. My plan is to stay here during this crisis that has started and is coming. It's probably going to get much worse all around the globe. I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but I mean, this is early. Who knows? It could be 3 months, could be 6 months. We'll see. To everyone watching, stay strong. Tough times create tough people.
Hi guys, Ash from the north of England. Thank you to Gabe for setting this up and allowing us travelers to share in this time of uncertainty. So my story is a little bit bizarre in that something happened to me that actually stopped me from getting trapped when I was traveling. So 3 weeks ago, I was in Myanmar, in Bagan. I was hiking around in a temple. It was very dark, very isolated. I tried to go up a corridor, and I was actually bitten on my neck by a bat. So I knew I had to immediately seek post-prophylaxis rabies treatment. I went to the local clinic. Unfortunately, they didn't have the resources to be able to deal with it, so I had to get an emergency transport down to the capital city of Yangon to get my treatment. They said to me that I should stay in Yangon to finish the course of the treatment over a period of 3 weeks. However, you can understand that at the time I was very anxious, so I really just wanted to be in a place more comfortable, more familiar, so I booked my flight back to the UK, and now I'm home. I'm absolutely fine. For anyone who is concerned, worried, thank you very much. Absolutely fine, nothing wrong, but I just find it ironic that potentially having a deadly virus stopped me from being stuck on the other side of the world and having, another potentially deadly virus. So thanks for listening, guys, and everybody stay safe.
Hello Gabe and everyone, in this short video I want to share my story of getting back from Bali back home. I left my country, Romania, at the beginning of the year with the intention of traveling through Southeast Asia for the next 6 to 12 months. After 1 month and a bit in Bali, I should have prepared for leaving to Thailand. Unfortunately or fortunately, at the beginning of March I started reconsidering what should I do. The situation got pretty bad, so I started looking at some flights back home. I bought one, Bali to Singapore, 9 hours layover in Singapore, Singapore to Berlin, a 13-hour flight, another 9 hours layover in Berlin, and then my last flight back to Bucharest. It was horrible, but nonetheless it seemed I was pretty inspired to do this, since the situation got way worse now. I still have some friends blocked in Bali and I wish them to be safe. It's been more than 2 weeks since I arrived, no symptoms, no anything, so I'm safe and back home. I hope everyone is safe and well. Find a place, home or somewhere else, and stay inside. Bye bye.
Hi there, I'm Nora Dunn, otherwise known as the Professional Hobo, and I'm not wearing any pants. Just one of many silver linings that come from all this self-isolation with the new coronavirus. I traveled full-time for 12 years before coming back to Canada and establishing a home base here, but I continued to travel for about 6 months of every year. And I was in the middle of one of my longer trips, spending the winter in Greece when coronavirus started getting really serious. And I saw signs of it in Europe before North America, I think, was perhaps taking it very seriously. Italy and Greece both had shut down all their festivities and parading as part of Carnival, which is a huge celebration. France had closed the Louvre, and I saw the writing on the wall. And whether you call it divine inspiration or a series of coincidences or just dumb luck, I decided to cut my travels short early and I returned to Canada. I got back to Canada before things like quarantine and self-isolation and any of the lockdowns had begun. So in many senses, I feel very lucky to have returned. I'm of course self-isolating as much as anyone else is. And quite frankly, it's kind of business as usual for me anyway. I work online. I'm used to working from wherever I live or stay in the world. I just happen to be in my comfortable little nest of a home. And if anything, 12 years of full-time travel has taught me, it's that there's no place like home. So I'm very happy to be here and to be going through all these crazy changes, knowing that I have a place that I can call mine. Feel free to learn more about what I'm about and where I am in the world at any given moment at theprofessionalhobo.com. Thanks.
Hey Gabe, greetings from New Zealand. Been here for about a month. This is the camper van. We bought an old carpenter's van and redid it, spent 2 weeks redoing it into this camper van here. The plan was to drive around and check out the national parks of New Zealand and stay in campgrounds for free with our camper van. The current situation has turned into New Zealand went on lockdown, a nationwide lockdown yesterday, and they closed down all the national parks and a lot of private campgrounds were shutting down, and so we were left scrambling trying to figure out what we were going to do. We figured they were going to be locking public restrooms and stuff like that, and so what we ended up doing, my wife and I, is we booked an Airbnb here on this farm, but we're left in a position where we don't exactly know what is going to be happening. We initially got 3-month visa when we got here about a month ago, so we have 2 months left on our 3-month visa, and we just don't know. We filed for an extension. We applied for an extension to the visa because, they only have about 200 cases in all of New Zealand right now. Most of those are on the North Island. We're on the South Island of New Zealand, so it'd be safer for us to stay here than it would be to go back to the United States. So I think the biggest problem right now is just not knowing what the future will hold. Right now, the lockdown in New Zealand is supposed to last for at least a month, so we're hunkered down in place for a month. And then after that, hopefully the cases clear up in New Zealand. We can get back on the road and explore some more of this beautiful country. Obviously, with the current situation, a lot up in the air, and initially there was kind of some hesitancy on the part of locals to open up their homes through Airbnbs or hotels to travelers. There's been like a mild kind of backlash against travelers because some people were coming into the country and they were supposed to self-isolate for 2 weeks and they weren't doing that. And I read a report of one woman at a hostel who was actually forcibly deported because she arrived from the airport and the hostel manager reported her to immigration because she wasn't self-isolating. So occasionally in the camper van over the last week, we've gotten a few dirty looks from locals. But other than that, everything's pretty good. It's a beautiful place to be locked down right now. Got plenty of food and we are allowed to go to the grocery store. Planning on doing that hopefully just once a week, or if we can once every 2 weeks. But this farm in central New Zealand, locked down, but doing pretty good, I think. So
my travel story, I was in El Nido in the Philippines, and I was at a friend's house, and the president of the Philippines came on, and he announced that they were shutting down all the airlines in like 2 days. My friends told me that if I didn't leave right then, I was going to get stuck there for 30 days. So my fiance and I, we rushed home we rushed back to the hotel on a scooter because they didn't have Wi-Fi there, and we tried to buy a ticket. It took like 45 minutes because the website kept crashing, and I finally bought a ticket for El Nido to Manila. So the next day I flew out. I get to Manila. There's thousands of people like trying to get out of the country before the 2 days was up. I got lucked out, and this taxi driver picked me up and took me to like an off-airport travel agency site. And the girl there, she got me a ticket on Japan Airlines, and I flew out that night, and then I flew to Japan, and then I flew from Japan to San Francisco. Then I used my airline miles to get back to buy a ticket to go from San Francisco to Pittsburgh. So I left on Friday and I was home on Sunday.
Hi everyone, this is Stephen from Wiltshire in the UK. So I've been travelling long term and I'm currently in a hostel in Taiwan. I've been in Taiwan since before the crisis in Europe started to escalate. So yeah, I've had to change my plans. I was originally going to go back to Europe and work there as an English teacher, go back and see family and friends in the UK, but I decided to change my plans and stay here in Taiwan and look for a job here as an English teacher. So yeah, Taiwan is a great place to be. Everything's running normally here. Shops are open, restaurants are open, so it's a great place to be. I hope everybody stays well. So stay happy, stay healthy, stay positive.
Hi guys, I'm Tasha from Travel and Tash. I'm going to tell you briefly about my experience travelling from Spain to England during last week's intense lockdown and the announcement that Spain were going to close off their airspace. So essentially I've been in isolation with my mother and auntie, and that had been going on from basically Sunday through to Friday. And I was able to actually get onto a flight on Friday, flying out of Santander in northern Spain, going to London Stansted. A lot of flights had actually been completely cancelled between Bilbao and London. And so I was basically only able to get onto the Ryanair flight that was still keeping its routes open between England and Spain. And anyway, get to the airport. The airport is pretty much, very empty, and it turns out that only 13 of us were actually on this flight. I got to the front desk area and the guy was like, stand back, don't come any closer. And it was like, oh goodness. But yeah, I heard from the passengers as I was waiting to board that this was the last flight out of Spain. And I'm sure that that was not actually necessarily the case. There were still more flights due to fly out of Spain. But nevertheless, I was so relieved to get on that flight with Ryanair and just finally land in England.
What's up guys, my name is Christian, or as you may know me, Los LeBlanc, and I'm a full-time travel filmmaker, but I'm currently a full-time quarantiner. Here it is day 8 of me self-isolating and staying inside, and I'm just so grateful to be back here in Vancouver, Canada. Because it was just 8 days ago that I was in one of the current epicenters of COVID-19, Switzerland. Switzerland is sadly a country that has so quickly displayed the viral tendency and capacity of this virus. When we first booked our tickets to Zurich, it was the 3rd of March. There was only 22 cases. Today it is I don't even know what day it is. Today is March 25th. Every day is blending together right now. And there's currently almost 10,000 cases in Switzerland of this deadly virus. It is quite literally spreading like wildfire, and it's having some tragic consequences to countless families around the world. My thoughts and prayers go out to so many people that are directly being impacted by the virus right now. I am so grateful to be back here in Canada, to be back in the comfort of my beautiful country, and to be able to be there for family if they ever needed me. But right now I can't help anyone until I've spent my 2 weeks in quarantine. That way, if anything came back with me, it dies here inside of this basement. Guys, I want to say it is so important right now to do your part. Stay inside, be socially distant, and just keep up to date with what your local government is telling you is the best move to do. And on a more personal note, make sure you're there to support one another. There's going to be some incredibly difficult times upon us as a planet, but some families, some people are just going to be dragged to their lowest points, and it's our job to make sure that we can support these people in this time of need. And Gabriel, I want to say thank you for making this video. It's super important for people to be aware of just how fast this is spreading and how important it is to do their part and self-quarantine right now.
Namaste Gabriel, my name's Carl Rock, and I'm stuck here in the Himalayas in India. But I shouldn't really say stuck here because this all kind of strangely went to plan for me. I was planning to come here to the Himalayas to study Hindi full-time for 3 months, and the day before I arrived, everything was fine. Then the next day, I think it was March 16th, something like that, they closed down all the schools here in India. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? Schools are closed. How am I going to study Hindi? But anyway, they had an option, Skype classes. So I'm here doing Skype classes. And at that time, we thought that the schools would open in 2 weeks on March 31st. But just last night, the Prime Minister of India announced that, nah, sorry, there's going to be a 3-week lockdown. Nothing is going to be open. You can't even leave the house. And these measures have to be taken, actually. They really have to be taken. And I can say that India is taking good steps, actually. Very good steps. In line with my home country, New Zealand, actually. So, yeah, I'm happy and I feel safe here in India. And the benefit for me is I'd already planned to have these 3 months off and that I would be studying Hindi. And that's exactly what I'm doing, except now I'm kind of forced to only study Hindi and spend my time focusing on studying Hindi and watching Hindi films and all that kind of stuff. So it hasn't worked out badly for me. The worry is my family is in Delhi, my wife and her parents, they live there. So, you know, I have that worry about them because if something's going to happen, if the pandemic were to spread, you know, Delhi would be a place that it could happen. And if you think about if one person in a slum gets this disease, how it can spread through a slum of a few thousand or more people, that's kind of scary. So yeah, I'm glad the Indian government is taking good steps against this pandemic, and I'm happy to be up here in the Himalayas. Like, I'm isolated up here, actually. So my situation has worked out fine, okay? But yeah, I worry about my friends in the bigger cities in India. I worry about the people who are less fortunate than me and don't have the sanitation available to them like I do. And yeah, it's a real worry, okay? But right now, all I can do is stay inside this hotel in the Himalayas and study Hindi. And yeah, that's it. That's my story. That's what I'm doing during the lockdown here in India.